Take off the top, right now, or I'll rip it off myself. Victoria Ashford's voice carried across the Riverside Meadows community pool like a whip crack. 30 families froze mid-conversation. Emma Chen, 15 years old and waist-deep in the shallow end, stared up in confusion at the HOA president looming over her. What? I don't understand. That swimsuit is obscene. Victoria's manicured finger jabbed toward Emma like an accusation. You're violating community decency standards. Strip it off now, or I'll have you forcibly removed and banned. Emma's voice trembled. It's just a regular two-piece from Target. I don't care where trash buys its clothes. Victoria stepped closer to the pool's edge, her designer cover-up rustling. This is a family environment. You're dressed like you belong on a street corner. The top comes off, or you're done here. Jessica, Emma's friend, gasped beside her. A mother nearby pulled her toddler closer. The lifeguard stood frozen, uncertain whether to intervene against the woman who controlled everyone's property values. Please, I'll just leave. Emma started climbing the pool ladder, humiliated tears already forming. Victoria grabbed her arm as she emerged. Not until you remove that top. You don't get to violate our rules and just walk away. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. Because what happened next wasn't about a swimsuit. It was about a woman drunk on petty power, finally wielding it against someone whose protector she'd catastrophically underestimated. Someone who understood the law better than she ever would. Who knew exactly where authority ended and assault began. Marcus Chen stood at the pool gate, grocery bags in hand, still wearing his work boots from the morning shift at Regional Airport. He was 38, perpetually exhausted, and had spent 3 years keeping one promise above all others: protect Emma. Keep her whole. Keep her from ever feeling powerless. He watched Victoria yank his niece's swimsuit strap down. The teenager screamed, not pain, but pure horror, as 30 people watched her scramble to cover herself. Victoria stood there triumphant, righteous, completely convinced she'd just enforced standards instead of committing a crime. Don't touch her. Marcus's voice cut through the chaos with a flatness that made heads turn. He set the grocery bags down with careful precision and walked forward. Victoria's eyes swept over him. Work boots, discount polo, oil still under his fingernails from checking fuel lines. Nobody. Her expression dismissed him before he'd taken 3 steps. This doesn't concern you. Your daughter is violating... Niece, Marcus corrected quietly. And she's a minor you just assaulted in front of witnesses. I have the authority as HOA president to enforce community regulations. You have the authority to govern property disputes and collect fees. His voice remained eerily calm. You don't have the authority to put your hands on a child or force her to remove clothing in public. Daniel Reeves, a neighbor Marcus barely knew, reached Victoria first. Jesus Christ, Victoria, what are you thinking? 2 other fathers moved between Victoria and the pool. Marcus reached Emma, who was sobbing, trying to fix her top with shaking hands while everyone stared. He pulled off his own shirt and wrapped it around her shoulders, shielding her from 30 pairs of eyes that had just witnessed her humiliation. She was dressed inappropriately, Victoria announced to the gathering crowd, her voice rising. I enforced our standards. That's my job as president. You assaulted a 15-year-old girl. Marcus guided Emma toward the exit, one hand protective on her shoulder. His tone never changed, steady, factual, devastating in its certainty. In front of at least 30 witnesses, with 3 security cameras recording, he nodded toward the mounted cameras. I suggest you stop talking and call a lawyer. Victoria's face flushed crimson. How dare you threaten me? Do you have any idea who I am? Who my husband is? I could have you evicted from this community. Marcus stopped at the gate. He looked back at her once with an expression so carefully neutral it was almost frightening, and said nothing at all. He didn't need to threaten, didn't need to shout or explain. He'd spent 12 years wearing a judge's robe, presiding over cases exactly like this. Powerful people who confused authority with permission to harm. People who thought their position made them untouchable. Victoria had no idea she'd just handed him everything he needed to destroy her. But she would learn. He drove Emma home in heavy silence, his jaw tight, his mind already cataloging evidence with the methodical precision of someone who'd built hundreds of legal cases. Emma cried quietly in the passenger seat. his work shirt still wrapped around her like inadequate armor. When they pulled into the driveway of their modest two-bedroom house, the smallest home in Riverside Meadows, the one Victoria had sneered at during HOA meetings, Emma finally spoke. "I just wanted to swim." Marcus turned off the engine and looked at his sister's daughter. The girl he'd promised Lynn he'd protect from a world that was often vicious to people it considered beneath notice. The promise he'd left his judgeship to keep. "I know," he said softly. "She's going to get me banned. She's going to fine you." She said, "Emma." He met her red, swollen eyes. "I'm going to handle this. Trust me." She searched his face, looking for reassurance or maybe revenge. What she found was something quieter, but infinitely more dangerous. Absolute certainty. Inside, Marcus made grilled cheese sandwiches Emma barely touched. He sat at the kitchen table after she retreated to her room, pulled out his phone, and began documenting with the precision he'd once used to prepare bench decisions. Time-stamped photos of Emma's tear-stained face. Her testimony, recorded with permission, voice shaking but clear. Screenshots of the pool's posted rules, none mentioning swimsuit restrictions. The facility manager's contact information for Monday morning. And finally, the non-emergency police line. "I need to report an assault on a minor," he said when dispatch answered. His voice carried the same steady control it had at the pool, the tone of someone who knew exactly how the system worked because he'd spent years running it. Victoria Ashford had just stripped a judge's niece in public, then threatened the judge himself. She just didn't know he was a judge yet. The police officer arrived 40 minutes later, notebook in hand and skepticism already settling into his expression. Marcus had seen that look before, from the other side. The look that said this was probably just another neighbor dispute in a wealthy subdivision, nothing worth the paperwork. "Mr. Chen?" Officer Bradley was young, maybe 26, with the careful politeness of someone still learning when situations mattered. "You reported an assault?" "On my 15-year-old niece, at the community pool." The HOA president physically removed her clothing in front of approximately 30 witnesses. Marcus handed him a printed timeline he'd already prepared. "Here's what happened, with exact times based on my phone's location data and the pool's entry log." Bradley's eyebrows rose slightly. He scanned the document, then looked up. "You have this pretty well organized." "I work with systems," Marcus said simply. "I know documentation matters." Emma emerged from her room reluctantly. Marcus's shirt still wrapped around her shoulders like a security blanket. Her eyes were swollen, her voice barely above a whisper, as she recounted what happened. How Victoria had demanded she remove her top. How she'd grabbed Emma's arm when she tried to leave. How the strap had been yanked down in front of everyone. "Did anyone else see this?" Bradley asked, pen hovering over his notebook. 30 people minimum. Marcus pulled up his phone. "I have 3 names and numbers already. Daniel Reeves at 555-01-7, Sarah Martinez at 555-0392, and Kevin Phillips at 555-083. All witnessed the physical contact. The pool also has security cameras, 3 of them. I confirmed their positions and angles before we left." Bradley studied Marcus with new attention. "You confirmed the camera positions?" "I wanted to make sure the incident was recorded before anyone could claim the footage was accidentally deleted or corrupted." Something shifted in the officer's demeanor. "You mind if I ask what you do for work, Mr. Chen?" "I inspect fuel systems at the airport." Not a lie, just not complete. "I'm used to being thorough." Bradley took Emma's statement with more care after that, his questions precise, his notes detailed. He photographed the red marks on Emma's arm where Victoria had grabbed her. He collected the swimsuit as evidence, still damp in a plastic bag Marcus had already prepared. When he left, he promised to follow up within 48 hours. "He believed us," Emma said quietly after the door closed. "Truth has a weight to it," Marcus replied. "People recognize it when it's presented clearly." That night, Emma had her first panic attack. Marcus heard her crying around 2 a.m. and found her curled on her bed, hyperventilating, reliving the moment over and over. 30 people staring, Victoria's hand on her strap, the feeling of being exposed, powerless, humiliated. He sat on the floor beside her bed like he had when she'd first come to live with him after Lynn died. Back when Emma would wake up screaming for her mother, and Marcus had no idea how to be a parent, only knew that he'd promised his sister he'd try. "Breathe with me," he said softly. In for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It took 20 minutes for Emma's breathing to steady. When she finally fell asleep, Marcus stayed on the floor, his back against her bed, thinking about Lynn, about the promise he'd made in the hospital, while his sister's hand went cold in his. Take care of her. Don't let the world make her small. He'd failed today. He'd been 30 seconds too late to stop Victoria from putting her hands on Emma. 30 seconds too late to prevent the humiliation that would probably follow his niece for years. But he wouldn't fail at what came next. Monday morning, Marcus took a personal day from the airport. He called the pool facility manager and requested copies of the security footage, citing the active police investigation. He visited the Riverside Meadows HOA office and formally requested copies of all regulations regarding pool attire, along with documentation of Victoria's authority to enforce physical compliance. The office administrator, a nervous woman named Patricia, looked increasingly uncomfortable as Marcus laid out his requests in triplicate, each one precisely worded, each one impossible to refuse without raising legal red flags. I'll need to ask Mrs. Ashford about releasing these documents, Patricia stammered. You'll need to comply with a formal records request from a homeowner within 7 business days, per your own bylaws, Section 3.2, Marcus replied evenly. But feel free to consult with Mrs. Ashford first. He could see Patricia calculating, wondering how the airport mechanic knew the HOA bylaws better than she did. By Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. Marcus was replacing a filter housing on a 737 when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him step away from the aircraft and take the call. Mr. Chen, this is Linda Torres with Child Protective Services. I need to schedule a home visit to discuss some concerns that have been raised about your guardianship of Emma Chen. The wrench in Marcus's hand went still. What concerns? I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, but a formal complaint has been filed alleging an unfit home, environment, and inappropriate supervision. I can come by tomorrow at 2 p.m., or we can schedule. Tomorrow is fine, Marcus said quietly. His voice remained calm, but his mind was already racing. Victoria. It had to be Victoria. She'd just escalated from assault to trying to take Emma away from him. If you want to see how this mechanic outplays this HOA tyrant, subscribe and turn on notifications, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. That evening, Marcus sat Emma down at the kitchen table. CPS is coming tomorrow. Victoria filed a complaint. Emma's face went white. She's trying to take me away from you? She's trying. He reached across and squeezed her hand. She won't succeed. Our home is clean. You're thriving in school. You have a therapist. I have stable employment. There's nothing for them to find because there's nothing wrong. But what if, Emma, listen to me. He waited until she met his eyes. I've handled cases like this before. I know how the system works. Victoria made a massive mistake. She didn't just assault you, she left evidence. And now she's compounding it by filing a false report. Every move she makes from here just builds our case stronger. Our case, Marcus smiled, thin and cold. You don't attack someone's family and walk away clean. Victoria's about to learn that the hard way. Linda Torres arrived at exactly 2 p.m. on Wednesday, her expression professionally neutral, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. She was maybe 45, with sharp eyes that had probably seen every kind of household dysfunction imaginable. Marcus recognized the look, the carefully cultivated skepticism that kept CPS investigators from being manipulated by charming abusers or fooled by surface appearances. He'd worked with dozens of investigators like her during his years on the bench. Good ones, thorough ones. Mr. Chen, thank you for accommodating the visit on short notice, Linda said, her tone polite but distant. I'll need to speak with Emma separately, and I'll need to see the home, including her bedroom. Of course. Marcus stepped aside, letting her enter. Would you like something to drink? Water? Coffee? Water would be fine. The house was small but immaculate. Marcus had spent the previous evening making sure everything was all ready as it should be, not hiding anything, just ensuring the evidence of their life together was visible. Emma's academic awards lined the hallway. Framed photos of Lynn covered the mantel, a visual timeline of Emma's mother from childhood through her final year. The kitchen smelled like the cookies Marcus had baked that morning, a Wednesday tradition he'd started to give Emma something stable to count on. Linda's eyes swept the space with practiced efficiency, cataloging details. She accepted the water glass and set her portfolio on the coffee table. The complaint alleges an unfit environment and inappropriate supervision. Specifically, that Emma is allowed to dress provocatively and that you've demonstrated poor judgment regarding her welfare. The complaint was filed by Victoria Ashford, Marcus said evenly. The HOA president who assaulted Emma at the community pool on Saturday. I filed a police report that evening. Officer Bradley has the case. Linda's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. You're saying the complainant is someone you're in a legal dispute with? I'm saying the complainant physically grabbed my niece and pulled down her swimsuit in front of 30 witnesses, then filed this complaint 2 days after I reported her for assault on a minor. Marcus slid a folder across the table. Here's the police report, witness statements I've collected, Emma's therapist contact information, and her school records for the past 3 years. You'll see straight A's, perfect attendance, and a commendation from her guidance counselor last month. Linda opened the folder slowly. Her eyes moved across the documents with increasing focus. You have this very well organized. I believe in documentation. Marcus kept his voice neutral, professional. Emma came to live with me 3 years ago after my sister died in a car accident. Emma was 12, traumatized, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I learned. She sees a therapist every other Wednesday. That's why I bake cookies on Wednesdays, so she has something good to come home to afterward. She's in honors classes. She volunteers at the library on Saturdays. She has friends, hobbies, stability. And Saturday's incident at the pool was the first time in 3 years that anyone has questioned my guardianship. 36 hours after I file assault charges against Victoria Ashford. Linda closed the folder and looked at him directly. May I speak with Emma now? Marcus called his niece down from her room. Emma appeared in jeans and one of her academic competition t-shirts, her hair pulled back, her hands twisting nervously together. She looked exactly like what she was, a good kid who'd done nothing wrong. Hi, Emma. I'm Linda Torres. Linda's voice softened considerably. I just need to ask you some questions about living here with your uncle. Is that okay? Emma nodded, glancing at Marcus. I need to speak with you privately, Linda said gently. Would you be more comfortable in your room, or would you like your uncle to step outside? My room is fine, Emma whispered. Marcus waited in the kitchen while they talked upstairs, forcing himself not to pace, not to stress eat the cookies, not to let the old courtroom anxiety creep back in. He'd presided over hundreds of CPS cases. He knew how this worked, knew the questions Linda would ask, knew Emma would answer truthfully because the truth was their strongest weapon. 20 minutes later, they came back downstairs. Emma's eyes were red but calm. Linda's expression had shifted entirely, the professional skepticism replaced by something harder, something angry. Mr. Chen, I'd like to see Emma's room, then we'll talk. He led her upstairs. Emma's bedroom was a teenage girl's sanctuary. Posters of bands Marcus didn't recognize, a desk covered in textbooks and sketch pads, a bookshelf overflowing with novels. Photos of Emma with her mother everywhere. Awards, certificates tacked to a corkboard. A jersey from her soccer team hanging on the back of her door. Linda took it all in, silently. She opened the closet, checking for warning signs Marcus knew she'd been trained to spot. Inadequate clothing, signs of neglect, anything concerning. She found winter coats, shoes organized on a rack, a hamper with laundry waiting to be washed. Normal, healthy, safe. Emma told me about Saturday, Linda said finally, still looking at the photos of Lynn. About what Mrs. Ashford did, about the panic attack she had that night. It was her first since last spring, Marcus said quietly. We'd been doing really well. Her therapist was talking about reducing sessions to monthly. She also told me about the cookies, about Wednesday movie nights, about how you helped her with her history project last month, even though you didn't understand half the material. Linda turned to face him, and her professional mask had cracked completely. Mr. Chen, I've been doing this job for 16 years. I've seen actual unfit homes. This isn't one of them. Something in Marcus's chest loosened slightly. This complaint is malicious, Linda continued, her voice tight with controlled anger. It's retaliatory, and it's wasted my time while actual children in danger wait for investigation. She pulled out her phone. I'm closing this case as unfounded, but I'm also filing a report with the prosecutor's office recommending charges against Mrs. Ashford for making a false statement to CPS. In this state, that's a felony." Marcus blinked. "A felony? People who weaponize my department to settle personal scores put real children at risk. Mrs. Ashford just committed a serious crime." Linda's smile was grim. "I assume the police report you filed is still active. Officer Bradley said he'd follow up within 48 hours. That was 3 days ago. Call him. Tell him CPS is filing supporting charges. This changes everything." She snapped her portfolio closed. "Emma is lucky to have you, Mr. Chen. I'm putting that in my official report." After Linda left, Emma finally let herself cry. Not from fear this time, but from relief. Marcus held her while she shook, thinking about Victoria Ashford sitting in her mansion somewhere, probably convinced she'd just destroyed him. She had no idea she'd just handed him the ammunition that would end her. Daniel Reeves knocked on Marcus's door Thursday evening, a six-pack of beer in one hand and an uncomfortable expression on his face. Marcus had seen him maybe 3 times since moving to Riverside Meadows 2 years ago. Casual waves across driveways, brief nods at the mailbox. Neighbors and geography only. "I hope this isn't a bad time," Daniel said. "I wanted to check on Emma. My daughter Sophia was at the pool on Saturday. She hasn't stopped talking about what happened." Marcus stepped aside, letting him in. "Emma's doing better. Thank you for intervening. I should have moved faster." Daniel set the beer on the kitchen counter, his lawyer instincts clearly wrestling with something. "Look, I gave a statement to the police. They called me yesterday for follow-up. Officer Bradley mentioned CPS got involved." Victoria filed a false complaint. The investigator closed it and recommended felony charges. Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "She filed a false CPS report after assaulting Emma in front of witnesses?" He let out a low whistle. "That's spectacularly stupid. She just handed you a gift-wrapped case." "That's the assessment, yes? You planning to sue her civilly? Because I practice family law, and I'd be happy to refer you to someone excellent who handles—" Daniel stopped mid-sentence, his face changing as something clicked. "Wait, Marcus Chen? M. Chen?" His eyes widened. "Judge Marcus Chen?" The silence stretched between them. Marcus had wondered when someone would make the connection. He'd hoped for more time, but the legal community in their county wasn't that large. Eventually, someone who'd practiced in his courtroom would recognize the name. "I took a leave of absence 3 years ago," Marcus said simply. "To raise Emma after my sister died." Daniel sat down heavily on one of the kitchen chairs, staring at him like he'd just revealed he was secretly an astronaut. "You're Judge Chen, from Family Court Division 2. I argued 3 cases in front of you between 2019 and 2021. You ruled against me twice." He laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. "You were fair both times. I just had weaker cases." "I remember you," Marcus said, which was true. Daniel had been competent, professional, never wasted the court's time with theatrics. "You represented the Alvarez custody modification. You gave primary custody to the mother, but ordered graduated visitation with the father. Both sides thought they'd lost, which meant you'd probably gotten it exactly right." Daniel shook his head slowly. "Victoria Ashford just assaulted a family court judge's niece, then filed false CPS reports against the judge. Holy shit. I'm not a sitting judge anymore. You're on leave. That's different than retired. You could come back any time." Daniel's legal mind was clearly racing. "Does she know? Does Victoria have any idea who you are? I'm the airport mechanic 2 streets over who lives in the smallest house in the subdivision. That's all anyone here knows." "That's all anyone here knows," Daniel repeated slowly. Then his expression shifted to something almost gleeful. "You're going to destroy her, aren't you? Legally, properly, by the book. She's going to walk into a courtroom expecting to bully her way through this and find out she picked a fight with someone who understands the system better than her own attorneys." Marcus said nothing, but his silence was confirmation enough. "I need to make a phone call," Daniel said, already pulling out his phone. "Judge Patricia Womack still handles criminal court, right? She presided over that judicial ethics conference in 2020. You gave the keynote on protecting minors in family proceedings. Daniel, Patricia needs to know, not because I'm gossiping, but because the legal community should know that one of our own is dealing with this. Victoria's going to hire expensive lawyers. They're going to try to bury you in motions and delay tactics. But if Patricia knows... He trailed off meaningfully. Marcus considered stopping him, considered maintaining the anonymous facade a little longer. But Daniel was right. The legal community took care of its own. And more importantly, Victoria's escalation had proven she wouldn't stop until she was forced to stop. "Make your call," Marcus said quietly. Daniel stepped into the backyard for privacy. Through the window, Marcus watched him pace, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing emphatically. When he came back inside 10 minutes later, his expression was grim satisfaction. "Patricia remembers you. She was sorry to hear about your sister. She said, and I'm quoting here, 'Tell Marcus that if Victoria Ashford doesn't know who she's dealing with yet, she's about to get an education.'" Daniel paused. "She also said you should call her directly, tomorrow. I'll think about it. Marcus, listen to me as someone who practices in these courts every day. Victoria has money and connections. Her husband Richard develops half the commercial real estate in this county. She's going to try to make this disappear through backroom pressure and expensive attorneys. You need allies. I have evidence, I have witnesses, I have the truth." "You have all of that," Daniel agreed. "But you also have a traumatized 15-year-old who just watched the system she's supposed to trust, weaponized against her. Emma needs to see this resolved cleanly, publicly, and with justice actually served, not buried in a plea deal that lets Victoria save face." That struck home. Marcus thought about Emma upstairs, probably listening to this conversation through her bedroom floor, about how she'd looked at him when Linda Torres cleared them, hopeful but still uncertain whether the system would really protect her. "I'll call Patricia tomorrow," he said finally. After Daniel left, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his phone, staring at Officer Bradley's number. The detective had left a voicemail that afternoon while Marcus was at work, saying he'd completed his investigation and was forwarding everything to the prosecutor's office. Linda Torres had apparently already sent her report about the false CPS complaint. The machinery of justice was turning, slowly, methodically, exactly as it was designed to work. Marcus pulled up his contacts and scrolled to a name he hadn't called in. 3 years, Patricia Womack, County Criminal Court. He didn't dial, not yet, but he saved her number to his favorites, right below Emma's school and the hospital emergency line, just in case. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding her phone. "Uncle Marcus, Sophia just texted me. She said her dad came over to talk to you. She said he called you Judge Chen." Marcus looked at his niece, at her nervous hope, and made a decision. "Come sit down," he said gently. "We should talk about what I used to do before you came to live with me, and what it might mean for what happens next with Victoria." Emma sat across from him, and for the first time since Saturday, Marcus saw something other than fear in her eyes. She saw possibility. Marcus told Emma everything. About his 12 years presiding over Family Court Division 2, handling cases that ranged from custody battles to child welfare emergencies. About the day Lynn died, when he'd been in the middle of a hearing and got the call from the hospital. About sitting in that sterile waiting room, still wearing his suit and judicial pin, listening to a doctor explain that his sister was gone and a 12-year-old girl had just lost her only parent. "Mom made you my guardian?" Emma's voice was small, processing information she'd never thought to question. "I always thought, I don't know, I thought maybe it was automatic or something. She named me specifically in her will, 2 years before the accident actually. She said if anything ever happened to her, she trusted me to raise you right." Marcus smiled sadly. "I told her she was being morbid. She told me she was being responsible. Why didn't you tell me you were a judge?" "Because I wasn't anymore, not really. I took indefinite leave to focus on you. You needed stability, not a part-time guardian juggling a courtroom docket." He reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You were more important than any case I'd ever hear." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "And now, Victoria. Now Victoria has created a situation where my background becomes relevant." Marcus kept his voice steady, clinical, the way he used to explain complex legal concepts to juries. "She assaulted you, which is criminal. She filed a false CPS report, which is a felony. And she did both while I was documenting everything with the precision of someone who's built hundreds of legal cases. She didn't just pick a fight with a mechanic, Emma. She picked a fight with someone who spent over a decade adjudicating cases exactly like hers. What happens now? Now the system works the way it's supposed to. Police investigate. Prosecutors review evidence. If charges are filed, she gets arrested, arraigned, and faces trial or accepts a plea deal. He paused, making sure Emma understood. I won't be involved in the prosecution. That would be a conflict of interest. But the evidence we've gathered, the witnesses we've documented, the pattern of escalation she's created, that speaks for itself. Will she go to jail? Maybe. Probably not for long, given it's a first offense, but she'll have a criminal record. She'll lose her position with the HOA. Her reputation in this community is already destroyed. I've gotten 3 calls today from neighbors who witnessed the assault and want to support us. Marcus's expression hardened slightly. Victoria thought she was untouchable because of her husband's money and her HOA title. She's about to learn that real authority doesn't come from position. It comes from legitimacy. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she asked the question Marcus had been dreading. Are you going to go back to being a judge? I don't know yet. That's not a decision I have to make today. But you could? I'm still credentialed. I'd need to formally request reinstatement, go through some reviews, but yes, I could. He studied his niece carefully. Would that bother you? No. Emma's answer came quickly, surprising them both. I think it would be good, actually. You're different when you talk about it, like you fit better in your own skin. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. I fit just fine being your uncle. I know, but maybe you can be both. She smiled, tentative but genuine. Besides, after watching how you've handled Victoria, I kind of want to see you do that in an actual courtroom. She has no idea what's coming, does she? No, Marcus said simply. She really doesn't. Friday morning, Marcus called Judge Patricia Womack from the airport maintenance office during his lunch break. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm with recognition. Marcus Chen, Daniel Reeves said you might call. I'm sorry it took something like this to bring you back into my orbit. Patricia, thank you for taking my call. Are you kidding? One of the finest family court judges I've worked with gets his niece assaulted by some power-drunk HOA tyrant, and I wouldn't take his call? Her tone shifted to professional concern. How's Emma doing? Better than expected. She's resilient. Marcus leaned back in his office chair, watching aircraft taxi through the window. Linda Torres from CPS recommended felony charges for the false report. Officer Bradley completed his assault investigation. I'm told everything's been forwarded to the prosecutor's office. David Kimura's handling intake this week. Good attorney, thorough. He'll see the value in the case immediately. Pattern of abuse, clear evidence, sympathetic victim. Patricia paused. Have you thought about coming back to the bench? I've thought about it. Because we could use you. Family court is drowning. 3 judges for a docket that needs 5. And selfishly, I'd love to have someone I trust handling the complex cases again. Marcus watched a fuel truck approach a 737, the driver moving with practiced efficiency. He'd found peace in this work, the mechanical simplicity, the clear protocols, the ability to fix problems with tools instead of rulings. But Emma's question from last night echoed, maybe you can be both. If I came back, it would be part-time. Emma comes first. Part-time would be a godsend. 2 days a week would let us clear the backlog. Patricia's voice gentled. Think about it, Marcus. No pressure, but your skills are wasted checking fuel lines when they could be protecting kids like Emma. I'll think about it, he promised. That afternoon, Marcus received a text from an unknown number. Mr. Chen, this is Kevin Phillips from the pool. My wife and I have been talking. We're signing the petition to remove Victoria from the HOA board. 32 households so far. Just thought you should know, people see what she did. An hour later, another text, this one from Sarah Martinez. Emma is welcome at our house anytime. Sophia misses her. Also, Victoria called my husband, trying to get him to retract his witness statement. We recorded the call. Let me know if you need it. By evening, Marcus had 7 messages from neighbors he'd barely spoken to in 2 years. The community was turning on Victoria, not because Marcus had campaigned or sought revenge, but because 30 people had watched her assault a child, and her subsequent behavior had proven it wasn't an aberration. It was who she was. Stay with us because the moment this HOA tyrant walks into that courtroom, She's about to discover who she really messed with. Victoria's world was crumbling, and she didn't even know the fault lines were forming beneath her feet. The formal charges came down on Monday morning, exactly 9 days after the pool incident. Marcus was replacing a hydraulic line on a regional jet when his phone buzzed with a call from Officer Bradley. "Mr. Chen, I wanted to give you a heads up before the media gets hold of it. The prosecutor's office filed charges this morning. Victoria Ashford is being charged with assault on a minor, filing a false police report, and making false statements to Child Protective Services. The last one's a Class E felony." Marcus set down his wrench carefully. "When's the arraignment?" "Wednesday at 9 a.m., County Criminal Court, Judge Patricia Womack's docket." Bradley paused meaningfully. "The prosecutor mentioned you used to work in the courthouse, said you'd understand the process." "I do. Thank you for keeping us informed. One more thing. Mrs. Ashford's attorney already called trying to negotiate this down before arraignment. David Kimura shut him down hard, said the evidence was too solid and the victim too sympathetic. He's not interested in making this go away quietly." After the call ended, Marcus sat in the aircraft cabin for a long moment, surrounded by the smell of hydraulic fluid and jet fuel, and allowed himself a thin smile. The system was working exactly as designed. Victoria had thrown her weight around expecting her money and connections to shield her, but she'd miscalculated catastrophically. She'd created a paper trail of malice that no expensive attorney could explain away. Emma was at school when the news broke. Marcus got a text from Daniel Reeves at 10:30. "It's on the local news. HOA president charged with assault on minor. Channel 7 has reporters at Riverside Meadows. Thought you should know." By lunch, Marcus's phone was flooded with calls from numbers he didn't recognize. Reporters looking for comment, probably. He ignored them all. Let Victoria deal with the media circus. He and Emma would stay quiet, dignified, and let the facts speak for themselves. When he picked Emma up from school that afternoon, she climbed into the truck with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Everyone knows," she said quietly. "About the charges, about Victoria. Sophia showed me the news article in study hall." "How do you feel about that?" Emma was quiet for several blocks. "Weird, like everyone's being really nice to me, which is good, I guess, but also they're treating me like I'm fragile. Sarah Brennan asked if I was okay 3 times in calculus." She picked at her backpack strap. "I just want things to be normal again. They will be, eventually." Marcus merged onto the highway. "Right now, people are processing what happened. They're trying to show support, even if it feels awkward. Give it time." "Do you think she'll actually go to jail?" "I think she'll face consequences. What those look like exactly will depend on her attorney's advice and whether she accepts a plea deal or goes to trial." "Would you—" Emma hesitated. "If she goes to court, would you have to testify?" "Probably not. I wasn't present for the assault. You'd testify, and the other witnesses. I'd only be called if they needed to establish your living situation or my guardianship." He glanced at her. "Are you worried about testifying?" "A little, but also not really." She frowned, working through her feelings. "Like, I'm scared of standing up in court in front of everyone, but I also want to. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense. You want your voice heard." "Yeah. And I want her to have to sit there and listen to what she did, not some lawyer version. The actual truth." Marcus felt a swell of pride. 3 years ago, Emma had been a terrified 12-year-old who could barely speak at her mother's funeral. Now she was finding her strength, her voice, her willingness to face down someone who'd tried to break her. Lynn would be proud. That evening, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Richard Ashford, Victoria's husband, stood on the porch in an expensive suit, his Mercedes idling in the driveway, his expression somewhere between embarrassed and furious. "Mr. Chen, I apologize for showing up unannounced. May I have 5 minutes of your time?" Marcus stepped outside, closing the door behind him. He didn't invite Richard in. "What can I do for you, Mr. Ashford?" "My wife made a terrible mistake." Richard's jaw was tight. "She's been under stress with the HOA, and she overreacted to a situation at the pool. But pressing felony charges seems excessive for what amounts to a misunderstanding. Your wife physically removed my 15-year-old niece's clothing in public, then filed false reports to try to have Emma taken away from me when I reported the assault." Marcus's voice remained level, factual. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern of criminal behavior. I'm prepared to offer compensation. Emma's therapy costs, your legal fees, whatever you've lost in wages dealing with this. Name a number. There is no number. Richard's expression hardened. Everyone has a number, Mr. Chen. I'm trying to handle this reasonably before it destroys my wife's reputation permanently. She made a mistake. She's willing to apologize publicly, resign from the HOA, whatever you want. But criminal charges, a felony record, that's going to follow her forever. Good, Marcus said quietly. Maybe it'll follow her into the next situation where she thinks about putting her hands on someone else's child. You're being unreasonable. I'm being a father. The word came out before Marcus could stop it, but he didn't take it back. Your wife assaulted my daughter. She humiliated her in front of dozens of people. She tried to have her taken away from me using false allegations. And now you're standing on my porch asking me to make it convenient for her? He shook his head. The answer is no. The charges stand. She'll face a courtroom and a judge and the consequences of her choices. Richard's face flushed. You're making an enemy of the wrong family. I have connections in this county. Then use them, Marcus interrupted calmly. Hire the best attorneys money can buy. File whatever motions you want. It won't change what happened or what 30 witnesses saw. Your wife committed crimes, Mr. Ashford. Documented, recorded, witnessed crimes. And no amount of money or connections changes that reality. Richard stared at him for a long moment, clearly unused to people who couldn't be bought or intimidated. Finally, he turned and walked back to his Mercedes without another word. Emma had been watching from the window. When Marcus came back inside, she looked at him with something like awe. You called me your daughter. Marcus paused. I did. Is that okay? Emma crossed the room and hugged him fiercely. Yeah, it's okay. He held her, thinking about Lynn, about promises kept, and families forged through loss and love rather than just blood. Wednesday morning would bring the arraignment. Victoria would stand before Judge Patricia Womack and enter her plea. The legal machinery would continue its methodical grinding. But tonight, Marcus had his daughter safe in his arms, and that was victory enough. Wednesday morning arrived cold and gray, the kind of October weather that made everything feel more serious. Marcus wore one of his two good suits, navy blue, slightly outdated, the same one he'd worn to Lynn's funeral 3 years ago. Emma insisted on coming to the arraignment despite his offer to let her stay home from school. I need to see this, she said firmly, adjusting her own dress in the mirror. I need to see her have to answer for what she did. They arrived at the county criminal court building at 8:30, early enough to avoid the worst of the media presence, but late enough that the courthouse was already humming with morning activity. Marcus hadn't been inside this building in 3 years, but his feet remembered the path, through security, up the stairs to the 3rd floor, down the corridor where he'd walked thousands of times in his robes. Judge Patricia Womack's courtroom was exactly as he remembered. Same wood paneling, same seal of the state hanging behind the bench, same worn chairs in the gallery. Daniel Reeves was already there, sitting in the back row. He nodded at Marcus with grim solidarity. David Kimura, the prosecutor, intercepted them before they could sit. He was younger than Marcus expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that Marcus immediately respected. Mr. Chen, Emma, I wanted to introduce myself before we start. I'll be handling this case through trial, assuming we don't reach a plea agreement. He shook Marcus's hand, then turned to Emma with a gentler expression. You won't need to speak today. This is just arraignment. The defendant enters her plea, and I outline the charges. But I wanted you to see it, if you're comfortable being here. I'm comfortable, Emma said, her voice steadier than Marcus expected. Good, because I want you to know that I've reviewed every piece of evidence in this case. The video footage, the witness statements, the CPS investigator's report. What happened to you was wrong, and I'm going to make sure the person responsible is held accountable. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Thank you. At 8:55, Victoria Ashford arrived with her attorney, a silver-haired man in a suit that probably cost more than Marcus made in a month, Lawrence Benton, from the most expensive defense firm in the county. Victoria looked smaller than Marcus remembered, less imperious in her designer pantsuit and minimal jewelry. Her face was carefully composed, but he could see the cracks, the tension around her eyes, the tight set of her mouth. She didn't look at Emma, didn't acknowledge their presence at all. At 9 a.m., sharp, the bailiff stood. All rise. The Honorable Judge Patricia Womack, presiding. Patricia entered through her chamber's door, black robes flowing, her expression professionally neutral. She was 61 now, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, a veteran of 20 years on the criminal bench. Her gaze swept the courtroom, landing briefly on Marcus with the slightest flicker of recognition before moving on. Be seated. Calling case number CR 2024-8847, State versus Victoria Ashford. Victoria and her attorney approached the defendant's table. David Kimura stood at the prosecution's table, a thick file open in front of him. Ms. Ashford, you're charged with assault on a minor, filing a false police report, and making false statements to Child Protective Services, a Class E felony. Do you understand these charges? Victoria's attorney answered for her. Yes, Your Honor. We understand the charges and maintain our client's innocence. We'll be entering a plea of not guilty. So entered. Patricia made a note. Mr. Kimura, does the state have a recommendation on bail? The state requests release on own recognizance with conditions, Your Honor. The defendant has no prior criminal record and isn't a flight risk. However, given the nature of the charges involving a minor victim, we request a no-contact order prohibiting the defendant from approaching within 500 feet of the victim, Emma Chen, or her guardian, Marcus Chen. We also request suspension of the defendant's access to the Riverside Meadows HOA community facilities where the assault occurred. Lawrence Benton stepped forward. Your Honor, those conditions are unnecessarily restrictive. Ms. Ashford lives in the Riverside Meadows community. Prohibiting her from community facilities effectively bans her from her own neighborhood. The victim also lives in that community, Counselor. Patricia's tone was ice. And the assault occurred at a community facility where the defendant was exercising HOA authority. The conditions are reasonable given the circumstances. Defendant is released on own recognizance with the stated conditions. No contact with the victims, no access to community facilities pending resolution of this case. Victoria's face went pale. Marcus could see the moment she understood. She was being ejected from her kingdom. The pool, the clubhouse, the tennis courts she'd ruled over like fiefdoms were now forbidden territory. Trial date is set for December 16th at 9 a.m. Patricia's gavel came down with finality. Next case. The entire proceeding had taken less than 10 minutes. Victoria was escorted out through a side door, her attorney speaking urgently in her ear. She still hadn't looked at Emma. Outside the courtroom, Daniel clapped Marcus on the shoulder. That went well. Patricia doesn't mess around. She never did, Marcus agreed. David Kimura joined them in the hallway. I expect Benton will reach out in the next few days about a plea deal. His client is facing serious charges with overwhelming evidence. He's going to want to negotiate something that keeps her out of jail. What are you willing to offer? Marcus asked. Honestly, not much. The felony stands, that's non-negotiable. But I might consider recommending suspended jail time in exchange for a guilty plea, probation, community service, and a formal apology. David looked at Emma. But that's only if the victims are comfortable with that outcome. This is your case, Emma. You get a say in how it ends. Emma considered this carefully. I want her to admit what she did. In court, in front of people. I don't want it buried in some paperwork where she can pretend it didn't happen. Then that's what we'll push for, David said simply. As they left the courthouse, Marcus noticed something had changed in Emma. She walked taller, her shoulders back, her expression clear. She'd faced Victoria in a courtroom, watched her squirm under judicial authority, seen the system work the way it was supposed to. Uncle Marcus, Emma said as they reached the truck, when we go to Mom's grave this weekend, can we tell her about today? Yeah, Marcus said softly. We can tell her. That evening, Marcus's phone rang with a number he'd been half expecting. Lawrence Benton, calling to discuss potential resolution options for his client. Marcus listened to the attorney's carefully worded pitch, how Victoria was willing to resign from the HOA, apologize publicly, accept probation and community service, how a trial would be traumatic for Emma, how they could resolve this quietly, efficiently, with minimal publicity. Mr. Benton, Marcus said when the attorney finally paused for breath, Your client had the opportunity to resolve this quietly when she could have simply apologized at the pool. She chose escalation instead. She chose to file false reports and try to destroy my family. So, no, we're not interested in making this convenient for her now. We'll see you in court." He hung up before Benton could respond. Emma, overhearing from the kitchen, smiled into her homework. The next 2 weeks became a war of attrition. Victoria's legal team filed motion after motion, attempting to suppress the surveillance footage, arguing the witness statements were prejudicial, requesting a change of venue because of local media coverage. Every motion was denied. Judge Patricia Womack dismantled each argument with clinical precision, her written rulings sharp and unambiguous. Marcus watched from the sidelines, reading the filings Daniel forwarded to him, recognizing the desperation tactics of attorneys who knew they were losing. They were trying to delay, hoping Marcus would tire of the process and accept a settlement. They had no idea how patient he could be. The Riverside Meadows HOA held an emergency meeting on a Thursday night. Marcus didn't attend, but Daniel did, reporting back with barely contained satisfaction. 78% voted to remove Victoria from the board effective immediately. Her voting privileges are suspended pending the criminal case. They also voted to revoke the decency standards clause she'd added to the pool regulations. Turns out she'd never gotten proper approval for it in the first place. She just decided it was policy and enforced it. So, the rules she used to justify assaulting Emma didn't even exist? Marcus felt a cold satisfaction. That's going in our civil suit. You're filing civil? After the criminal case concludes, intentional infliction of emotional distress, defamation, assault, and battery, Emma's therapy costs alone are $10,000. Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. Victoria wanted a war. She's getting one. Emma's panic attacks had indeed returned with a vengeance. The therapist, Dr. Sarah Lindholm, had increased their sessions to weekly and started Emma on temporary anti-anxiety medication. Every bill, every prescription, every session note went into Marcus's meticulously organized file labeled Ashford Civil Damages. At school, Emma was handling the attention better than Marcus expected. The initial awkwardness had faded into something more solid. Respect, maybe, or recognition that she'd stood up to someone powerful and survived. Sophia and 3 other girls formed a protective circle around her in the cafeteria, shutting down gossip before it could spread. "I think I want to do mock trial next semester," Emma mentioned one evening over dinner. "Ms. Patterson said they need people who can handle pressure." Marcus looked up from his plate, surprise and pride warring in his chest. "You sure? After everything with the real trial?" "Because of everything with the real trial," Emma corrected. "I want to understand how it all works, how evidence gets presented, how arguments get made. David Kimura made it look like art, the way he shut down Victoria's attorney in arraignment. It is art, and science, and a lot of preparation. Like what you used to do." It wasn't a question. "Yeah, like that." Emma pushed food around her plate. "Are you going to go back? Judge Womack called you last week. I heard you talking." Marcus had hoped Emma hadn't noticed that conversation. Patricia had called to officially offer him a part-time position, 2 days a week, handling family court cases, effective January. He'd asked for time to think about it, but they both knew his answer was already forming. "I'm considering it," he admitted, "but only if you're okay with it. You come first, always." "I'm okay with it. More than okay." Emma met his eyes. "You're good at it, Uncle Marcus. And after watching what Victoria did, how she used her little bit of power to hurt people, I think the world needs more judges like you, ones who actually care about protecting kids. If you believe in real justice over petty power, hit subscribe, because what happens next proves that dignity always defeats arrogance." On November 1st, Lawrence Benton called David Kimura with a plea offer. Victoria would plead guilty to misdemeanor assault and filing a false report if the felony CPS charge was dropped. She'd accept probation, community service, and a formal apology. No jail time. David called Marcus immediately. "It's a reasonable offer, given trial uncertainty. I wanted your input before responding." "What's your recommendation?" "Honestly, I think we can do better. Our evidence is airtight. The surveillance footage is damning. 30 witnesses, half of whom have given statements. Linda Torres's CPS report is devastating. She used words like malicious and retaliatory in an official document. And Victoria's own escalation pattern shows consciousness of guilt. David paused. But trials are unpredictable. Juries can be sympathetic to first-time offenders. If you want certainty, the plea might be safer. Marcus considered. He'd presided over enough plea negotiations to know David was being honest about trial risk. But he also knew something David didn't, that Victoria needed more than a slap on the wrist. She needed the kind of public accountability that only a full guilty plea with allocution could provide. Counteroffer, Marcus said. She pleads guilty to all charges including the felony. She allocutes in open court, meaning she verbally admits to each element of what she did. She reads a formal apology to Emma in front of the judge. And we recommend suspended jail time with intensive probation conditions, mandatory counseling, community service teaching at risk youth, and a permanent no-contact order. That's aggressive. Benton will probably refuse. Then we go to trial. But I think Victoria's smart enough to see the writing on the wall. Her husband's already distancing himself. Did you see he moved out of their house last week? How did you know that? Riverside Meadows is a small community. People talk. Marcus didn't mention that 3 different neighbors had texted him, updates on Victoria's unraveling, the moving trucks, the late-night arguments, the for sale sign that appeared on the mansion's lawn yesterday morning. David was quiet for a moment. You know what you're doing, don't you? This isn't about revenge. You're systematically dismantling her life the same way she tried to dismantle yours. But you're doing it legally, properly, by the book. I'm doing what's necessary to protect my daughter and send a message that children aren't acceptable targets for petty tyrants. Marcus's voice remained level. Victoria had every opportunity to stop this. She chose escalation at every turn. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I'll present your counteroffer to Benton tomorrow. That night, Marcus sat at Lynn's grave with Emma beside him, both of them bundled against the November cold. They came every few weeks, bringing flowers, sharing updates, keeping Lynn connected to the life her daughter was building. We're getting close, Lynn, Marcus said quietly. Victoria's attorney is negotiating a plea, should be resolved in the next few weeks. Emma added her own thoughts. I'm not scared anymore, Mom. I was at first, after the pool, but Uncle Marcus showed me that bullies only win if you let them, and we didn't let her. Marcus reached over and squeezed Emma's hand. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set behind the cemetery trees, 2 people bound by loss and love, and the fierce determination to honor the woman who trusted them to take care of each other. The war wasn't over yet, but victory was close enough to taste. Lawrence Benton called David Kimura back within 24 hours. Victoria had accepted the counteroffer with one modification. She wanted the sentencing hearing delayed until after the holidays. Her attorney cited family circumstances and the need to prepare emotionally for the allocution. David relayed this to Marcus over the phone. I think she's stalling, hoping you'll soften over time, or maybe hoping something will change in her favor. Nothing's going to change. Marcus was in the airport maintenance hangar, taking his lunch break in the small office he shared with 2 other inspectors. But if she wants to delay sentencing until January, that's fine. It gives Emma more time to prepare her victim impact statement. You're sure about this? Having Emma speak in court? I'm sure she should have the choice. If she wants to speak, I'll support her. If she doesn't, that's fine too. Marcus watched through the window as a 747 was towed past. This is about giving Emma her voice back. Victoria took it away at that pool. The courtroom is where she reclaims it. The plea hearing was scheduled for November 20th. Victoria would formally plead guilty to all charges, and sentencing would follow on January 15th, giving the court time to complete a pre-sentence investigation and allowing both sides to prepare their statements. Marcus took the morning off work to attend. Emma stayed at school this time. She didn't need to see Victoria's guilty plea. That was just paperwork. The sentencing hearing would be the moment that mattered. The courtroom was less crowded than arraignment, just a handful of people scattered in the gallery. Daniel Reeves was there again, his presence steady and supportive. David Kimura sat at the prosecution table reviewing notes. And Victoria stood at the defense table beside Lawrence Benton, looking diminished somehow, her designer clothes hanging a bit looser than they had 6 weeks ago. Judge Patricia Womack entered precisely at 9. Case number CR 2024-8847, State versus Victoria Ashford. I understand we have a change of plea. Lawrence Benton stood. Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Ashford wishes to withdraw her not guilty plea and enter a guilty plea to all charges: assault on a minor, filing a false police report, and making false statements to Child Protective Services. Patricia's expression remained neutral, but Marcus caught the slight tightening around her eyes. She'd been expecting a plea deal that dropped the felony. The fact that Victoria was pleading to everything signaled just how badly her position had deteriorated. Ms. Ashford, is this your decision, made freely and voluntarily? Victoria's voice came out thin, barely audible. Yes, Your Honor. Has anyone threatened or coerced you into this plea? No, Your Honor. Do you understand that by pleading guilty to making false statements to Child Protective Services, a Class E felony, you will have a felony conviction on your permanent record? A long pause. Yes, Your Honor. Patricia proceeded through the standard plea colloquy, confirming Victoria understood the charges, the potential penalties, that she was waiving her right to trial. With each question, Victoria's responses grew quieter, more defeated. Marcus watched without satisfaction or glee. This wasn't victory yet. This was just the beginning of accountability. The court accepts the defendant's guilty plea and orders a pre-sentence investigation. Sentencing is scheduled for January 15th at 9 a.m. The defendant will remain released on own recognizance with all previous conditions maintained. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. Victoria turned to leave, and for the first time since the pool incident, her eyes met Marcus's across the courtroom. Whatever she saw in his face made her look away quickly, her attorney's hand on her elbow guiding her toward the exit. Outside, David approached Marcus with something that looked like respect. I've been prosecuting for 8 years. I've never seen a defendant plead guilty to a felony with zero concessions. Your counteroffer was brutal, and somehow you got her to accept it. Her attorney advised her correctly. The evidence was overwhelming. Going to trial would have been suicide. Still, most people in your position would have taken the first offer. Misdemeanor, probation, done. You held out for full accountability. David studied him. You've done this before, haven't you? Not as a victim, but from the other side. Marcus didn't confirm or deny. What matters is Emma gets her day in court. January 15th, she'll stand in front of that judge and tell her story. Victoria will have to sit there and listen. That's what justice looks like. Later that evening, Marcus told Emma about the plea hearing while they prepared dinner together. A Wednesday tradition, spaghetti and meatballs, the recipe Lynn had taught him years ago. She admitted it, everything. Emma stirred the sauce, her movements careful. Everything, the assault, the false reports, all of it. It's in the official court record now. No more denying it happened. Good. Emma tasted the sauce, added more oregano. Dr. Lindholm and I have been working on my victim impact statement. She said I should write down everything I want to say. Then we'll go through it together and make sure it's clear. What are you planning to say? The truth. How I felt when she grabbed me. How the panic attacks came back. How I was scared to leave the house for 2 weeks. Emma's voice stayed steady. But also, how you showed me that standing up to bullies works. That the system isn't perfect, but it can work if you're patient and document everything and don't give up. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Your mom would be so proud of you. I think she'd be proud of both of us. Emma turned off the stove. You kept your promise to her. You kept me safe. And you taught me that being strong doesn't mean being loud or mean. It means standing in your truth and not backing down. They ate dinner, talking about lighter things. Emma's upcoming mock trial tryouts. Marcus's decision about returning to the bench part-time. He'd accepted Patricia's offer that morning, starting January 6th. 2 days a week in family court, 3 days at the airport. A balance. After Emma went to bed, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop, reviewing the civil lawsuit his attorney had drafted. They'd file it the day after sentencing. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, assault and battery, defamation. The criminal case was about justice. The civil case was about making sure Victoria understood that actions had comprehensive consequences. His phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Just heard Victoria's house sold. Closed yesterday. She's moving to her mother's place in Florida before sentencing. Thought you should know. So Victoria was running. Not physically. She'd be back for sentencing. Her bail conditions required it. But emotionally, socially, she was abandoning the kingdom she'd tried so hard to rule. The mansion, the HOA presidency, the social status she'd wielded like a weapon. All of it gone. Marcus typed back, "Thanks for the update." He closed his laptop and walked upstairs, checking on Emma one last time before bed. She was asleep, her room full of the evidence of a life lived safely, fully, without fear. Academic awards on the walls, photos of friends, college brochures on her desk. Lynn's daughter was thriving. Marcus had kept his promise. And in 56 days, Victoria Ashford would stand before Judge Patricia Womack and face the final reckoning for trying to break her. May brought renewal in more ways than one. The Willowbrook Estates HOA board met in special session to discuss a proposal Harold had been championing for weeks, one that would transform the site of Lily's trauma into something meaningful. Marcus attended as the new community compliance director, sitting at the table where Victoria had once ruled with absolute power. The contrast wasn't lost on him. The same room, the same chairs, but an entirely different spirit. Where Victoria had demanded silence and obedience, Harold encouraged discussion and disagreement. "The pool renovation is complete," Harold announced, pulling up photos on the projector. "Thanks to the recovered funds, we've resurfaced the deck, upgraded the filtration system, added new safety equipment, and modernized the facilities. Total cost, $143,000. All from money Victoria stole that we got back." Janet Wu raised her hand. "I'd like to propose something. This pool represents a turning point for our community. We went from a place where children were terrorized to a place where they're safe again. I think we should commemorate that." "What did you have in mind?" Harold asked. Janet looked at Marcus. "I propose we dedicate the pool in memory of Sarah Chen. She grew up in this community. She loved this pool, and her husband's courage to stand up to Victoria saved all of us. It seems fitting." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Around the table, board members nodded. "I second the motion," said Tom Rodriguez, the newest board member. The vote was unanimous. Harold turned to Marcus. "We'd like Lily to help design the dedication plaque, and we'd like you both to speak at the ceremony if you're willing." Marcus could barely speak. "Sarah would have loved that. Thank you." The dedication ceremony was scheduled for the first Saturday in June, exactly 1 year after the pool incident. Over the next 3 weeks, Lily worked with a local artist to design the memorial plaque. She chose a simple bronze design with Sarah's name, the dates of her life, and an inscription she'd written herself. "A community is measured by how it protects its most vulnerable." Marcus found her crying over the sketch one evening. "You okay, sweetheart?" "I miss her so much," Lily said. "But I think she'd be proud of us, of what we did." "She would be. She'd be so proud of you especially, the way you survived what happened, the way you're healing, the way you're stronger now." "I'm not stronger. I still have nightmares. I still get anxious sometimes." "Strength isn't not being afraid. It's being afraid and living anyway." Marcus pulled her close. "You went back to that pool, Lily. After everything that happened there, you went back. That's the bravest thing I've ever seen." The morning of June 6th dawned clear and warm. Perfect pool weather. By 10 a.m., nearly 200 residents had gathered on the renovated deck. The space looked transformed. New tile work in shades of blue, modern lounge chairs, safety railings that met current code, and landscaping that softened the harsh fence line where Lily had been cornered. Harold opened the ceremony with a speech about community values, real values, not Victoria's weaponized version of them. He talked about transparency, accountability, and the responsibility they all shared to ensure abuse of power never took root again. Then he invited Lily to unveil the plaque. She walked to the covered bronze plate mounted near the pool entrance, Marcus beside her. Her hands shook slightly as she gripped the cloth, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "My mom used to bring me here every summer when I was little. She taught me to swim in this pool. She'd sit right there," Lily pointed to a bench near the shallow end, "and watch me practice my underwater handstands for hours. She never got tired of it. She always said a pool wasn't just about swimming. It was about joy and safety and belonging." Lily's voice caught, but she pushed through. "Last year, this place stopped feeling safe, but my dad reminded me that places don't have to stay broken, communities don't have to accept cruelty, and people who abuse power don't get to win forever." She pulled the cloth away. The bronze plaque gleamed in the morning sun. Sarah Chen Memorial Pool, 1979-2023. A community is measured by how it protects its most vulnerable. Dedicated June 2025. The crowd applauded. Several people were crying. Neighbors who'd known Sarah, families who'd been helped by Marcus's fight against Victoria, parents who understood how close they'd all come to losing something precious. Marcus stepped forward. Sarah believed that community wasn't about rules and regulations. It was about people taking care of each other. She believed that when you saw injustice, you stood up, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. He looked at the faces around him, Harold, Janet, the Johnsons, the Patels, families he'd helped save from Victoria's schemes. This pool represents what she believed, not perfection, but protection, not control, but care. I'm grateful my daughter will grow up swimming in water that bears her mother's name. After the ceremony, Harold pulled Marcus aside. There's one more thing. The board took another vote last night. He handed Marcus an envelope. Inside was a formal letter from the Willowbrook Estates HOA board to the Maryland General Assembly, supporting proposed legislation called the Homeowners Association Transparency and Accountability Act. "What's this?" Marcus asked. New laws being debated in Annapolis, mandatory independent audits for all HOAs, term limits for board members, a homeowner bill of rights that limits what HOAs can regulate, whistleblower protections. The whole package is based on what happened here, your case specifically. Marcus scanned the letter. It was addressed to Delegate Patricia Morrison, who'd introduced the bill in March after reading about Victoria's conviction. David Park told me they're calling it Chen's Law internally at the AG's office. Harold continued. It's probably going to pass. Your fight didn't just save Willowbrook. It's going to protect thousands of families across Maryland. That evening, Marcus received a text from David Park, as if on cue. FYI, Maryland just passed the HOA Transparency and Accountability Act. Governor's signing ceremony next week. Mandatory audits, term limits, homeowner bill of rights. We're calling it Chen's Law internally. You started something. Marcus sat on the back patio, watching Lily and Jasmine practice diving in the Sarah Chen Memorial Pool. The late afternoon sun turned the water gold. Their laughter carried across the yard, genuine, unafraid, the sound of childhood reclaimed. His phone buzzed again, this time a photo from Harold, the new community newsletter featuring a front-page story about the dedication ceremony, with a photo of Lily standing beside the memorial plaque, smiling. The headline read, "From Trauma to Triumph, How One Family Saved a Community." Marcus thought about the past year, the terror, the harassment, the slow grinding fight through bureaucracy and legal systems. He thought about Victoria sitting in a federal prison cell, stripped of everything she'd stolen and everything she'd built on stolen foundations. But mostly he thought about Lily, who'd been cornered and terrorized and forced to feel shame about her own body, now diving fearlessly into water that bore her mother's name. Victoria had tried to teach them that power meant the freedom to harm without consequence. Instead, she'd taught them that power without accountability was temporary, and that a single dad who knew how to read a spreadsheet could bring down an empire if he refused to stop documenting the truth. The pool where his daughter had been humiliated was now a memorial to resilience. The community that had been terrorized was now protected by laws bearing his name. And the woman who'd thought herself untouchable was learning that justice, while slow, eventually caught up to everyone. Marcus smiled and raised his glass of iced tea toward the pool, toward Sarah's memory, toward Lily's future, toward the possibility that sometimes, when you refuse to give up, the world actually changes. The weeks following the dedication ceremony brought a rhythm Marcus hadn't experienced in years, the rhythm of normalcy. He woke each morning without the knot of anxiety in his stomach. Lily left for school without panic attacks. The mailbox held bills and community newsletters instead of violation notices and legal threats. His new role as community compliance director was everything Victoria's reign had not been. Where she had weaponized rules, Marcus dismantled them. Where she had created barriers, he built bridges. His first major project was rewriting the CCRs, the governing documents Victoria had twisted into instruments of control. He assembled a committee of residents representing different demographics, retirees, young families, single parents, renters. Together, they stripped out 87 violation categories that served no purpose except generating fines. Gone were the regulations about grass height measured to the tenth of an inch. Gone were the aesthetic guidelines that had been used to target families who couldn't afford constant home improvements. Gone were the vague community standards that had let Victoria police everything from cooking smells to children's toys. What remained were genuine safety regulations and maintenance standards, rules designed to protect property values without destroying lives. This is what HOAs were supposed to be, Harold said during a board meeting in July, reviewing the revised documents. Tools for maintaining communities, not weapons for controlling people. The new CCRs passed with 94% homeowner approval, the highest turnout in Willowbrook's history. Marcus's second project was establishing a hardship fund, using a portion of the recovered embezzlement money. Families facing genuine financial difficulties could apply for temporary assessment relief or emergency home repair assistance, the opposite of Victoria's approach, which had been to foreclose at the first sign of trouble. The Johnsons were the first, all recipients. Their son's cancer treatment had left them with medical debt that made even basic home maintenance impossible. The hardship fund paid for their roof repair and gave them 6 months of assessment relief. "You gave us breathing room when we needed it most," Mrs. Johnson told Marcus at the August board meeting, tears in her eyes. "Victoria would have foreclosed. You helped us stay in our home." Marcus also implemented mandatory financial transparency. Every month, detailed financial statements were posted online, showing every dollar collected and spent, every vendor contract, every board decision. No more redactions, no more shell companies, no more secrets. It was the kind of governance Marcus had learned to value during his FBI years: accountability through documentation, trust through transparency. In September, Lily started high school. The transition Marcus had dreaded, new school, new pressures, the weight of everything she'd been through, turned out to be a beginning rather than an ending. She joined the swim team and quickly became one of their strongest butterfly swimmers. Her coach called Marcus after the first week of practice. "Your daughter has real talent. Has she considered competitive swimming?" Lily had always been athletic, but after Sarah died, she'd withdrawn from most activities. Now she was thriving, her times improving every week, her confidence rebuilding stroke by stroke. The pool that had been the site of her worst trauma had become the source of her healing. One evening in late September, Marcus sat in the bleachers watching Lily swim practice. She executed a perfect butterfly turn, her form textbook precise, her face determined and focused. His phone buzzed. A text from Grace. "Turn on the news. Channel 4. He pulled up the live stream on his phone. Maryland Governor Wesley Moore stood at a podium, flanked by legislators, holding up a document. "Today I'm proud to sign into law the Homeowners Association Transparency and Accountability Act," the governor said. "This legislation will protect Maryland families from the kind of predatory HOA management that devastated communities across our state. It requires mandatory independent audits, establishes term limits for board members, creates a homeowner bill of rights, and provides whistleblower protections for those who expose fraud." The governor looked directly into the camera. "This law exists because one father refused to accept that his daughter's safety didn't matter. Because one man had the courage to document evidence, expose corruption, and fight through a legal system that seemed stacked against him. His case became a roadmap for reform, and today, his victory protects every Maryland homeowner." Marcus watched the signing ceremony in the humid chlorine air of the high school pool, surrounded by the sounds of splashing water and teenage laughter. He thought about the journey from that terrible June day when armed contractors had cornered Lily to this September evening when state law now protected families from similar abuse. The governor's pen scratched across the bill. The legislation became law. Marcus's phone exploded with texts. "Harold, we did it, Janet. Sarah would be so proud. David Park, you changed the system. That's rare." Grace's message was simplest. Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about prevention. You prevented this from happening to thousands of families. That matters. Lily finished her laps and climbed out of the pool, grabbing her towel. She saw Marcus in the bleachers and waved, her smile bright and genuine. He waved back, his chest tight with emotions he couldn't quite name. Pride, relief, grief for Sarah, who should have been here to see this, gratitude that Lily had survived and was thriving. But mostly he felt something quieter and more profound, the sense that the past year hadn't been about revenge or even justice in the traditional sense. It had been about restoration, restoring safety, restoring dignity, restoring the belief that systems could work when people refused to let them fail. Victoria Castellane had been powerful. She'd had wealth, connections, and years of unchallenged authority. But she'd made one fatal miscalculation. She'd assumed that power was permanent and that her victims would stay silent. She'd sent armed thugs to terrorize a 14-year-old girl over not wearing a bra, thinking it would intimidate a family into submission. Instead, she'd awakened an investigator who'd spent 15 years learning that the most dangerous opponent wasn't the loudest or the richest. It was the one patient enough to document everything and methodical enough to build an unassailable case. Victoria had lost everything: her wealth, her freedom, her reputation, her business empire, all of it dismantled piece by piece through proper legal channels, forensic evidence, and the slow grinding machinery of justice. But Marcus hadn't just taken things from Victoria. He'd built things too. A community fund that helped families instead of destroying them. Governance rules that protected people instead of controlling them. Laws that would prevent future Victorias from victimizing future families. And most importantly, he'd helped his daughter reclaim her safety and her joy. Lily walked over, still drying her hair. "Ready to go home, Dad?" "Yes, sweetheart. Let's go home." As they walked to the truck, Lily chatted about her swim times and an upcoming meet. Her voice was light, unburdened by the fear that had weighed on her for so long. Marcus listened, responding to her excitement about the butterfly relay, and felt the last piece of tension he'd been carrying finally release. Victoria had tried to steal their home, their peace, their future. Instead, she'd given them something unexpected, proof that standing up to corruption, even when it seemed impossible, could actually work. That one person refusing to be silent could spark change that protected thousands. That, justice, while slow and frustrating and often incomplete, was still worth fighting for. They drove home through streets Marcus knew by heart, past the pool that now bore Sarah's name, past Harold's house where a new family was moving in, past the community center where he'd once worked as maintenance supervisor, and now worked as an advocate for the very people Victoria had tried to crush. The sun was setting over Willowbrook Estates, painting the modest townhouses in shades of gold, their home, their community, their victory. Not perfect, never perfect, but safe. And that was enough. 6 months later, on a crisp December evening, Marcus stood on the back patio, watching snowflakes drift down onto the Sarachine Memorial Pool. The water was covered for winter, but the bronze dedication plaque gleamed under the security lights Harold had installed. Better lighting, safer spaces, the kind of improvements that actually mattered. Lily was inside finishing college applications, 15 years old and already thinking about her future, pre-med programs where she could combine her love of science with her desire to help people. The trauma hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into purpose. She volunteered at the community center now, teaching younger kids to swim, turning the place where she'd been victimized into a space where she empowered others. Marcus's phone buzzed, a text from David Park. Appellate court upheld Victoria's sentence. Appeal denied. She'll serve the full 8 years. He stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. Victoria Castellane had become irrelevant, not because she wasn't serving time, but because the systems that had enabled her were being dismantled. Her punishment mattered less than the prevention her case had inspired. The Maryland HOA Transparency Act had been in effect for 3 months. Already, 12 HOA boards across the state had been removed after mandatory audits revealed fraud. 47 homeowners had used the new whistleblower protections to report abuse without fear of retaliation. 3 property management companies had closed rather than submit to the new oversight requirements. The ripples kept spreading. Marcus had been invited to speak at a national conference on HOA reform in Atlanta next month. Delaware was drafting similar legislation. Virginia's Attorney General had requested copies of Grace's forensic analysis to use as a template for their own investigations. What had started as one father protecting his daughter had become a blueprint for protecting thousands of families. But tonight, Marcus wasn't thinking about legislation or national impact. He was thinking about the small, quiet victories that mattered most. Lily laughing without flinching when someone knocked on the door. Harold stopping by with cookies, just to check in, because that's what neighbors did now. The Morrison family, the ones Victoria had foreclosed on, moving back into Willowbrook after buying a house too. Streets over, choosing to return to a community that had been transformed. The absence of fear, the presence of trust, the ordinary miracle of safety. Inside, Lily called out, "Dad, can you read my essay? It's about Mom and what happened and how it changed things." Marcus went inside, brushing snow from his shoulders. Lily's laptop was open on the kitchen table, her essay titled, "When Silence Breaks, How 1 Year Changed Everything." He read it slowly, his throat tightening with each paragraph. She'd written about the pool incident, the armed contractors, the humiliation and terror. But she'd also written about watching her father methodically build a case, learning that justice wasn't about revenge. It was about evidence, patience, and refusing to let powerful people define reality. "The day they dedicated the pool to my mom," Lily had written, "I realized that trauma doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of transformation, if someone cares enough to fight back. My dad taught me that the opposite of power isn't weakness, it's accountability. And accountability takes courage, documentation, and time." Marcus looked up, his eyes wet. "This is beautiful, Lily. Your mom would be so proud. You think it's too personal for a college essay? I think it's exactly right. You're not defined by what happened to you. You're defined by how you responded. That's what colleges need to see." Later that night, after Lily had gone to bed, Marcus sat alone at the dining room table where he'd first spread out Victoria's redacted financial records 18 months ago. The space where Grace had built her forensic analysis. The place where justice had been assembled one document at a time. He opened his laptop and began drafting an email to Harold and the HOA board. It was time for the next phase, establishing a regional coalition of reformed HOAs, sharing best practices, helping other communities implement transparent governance. The work wasn't finished. It never would be finished. But that was okay. Marcus had learned during his FBI years that you couldn't eliminate corruption entirely. You could only create systems that made it harder to hide and easier to expose. His phone buzzed one more time. "Grace, remember when you called me 2 years ago and said you needed help with HOA records? I thought it'd be a small case. Instead, you changed state law. Not bad for a maintenance supervisor." Marcus smiled and typed back, "Not bad for a team. Couldn't have done it without you." "That's the point," Grace replied. "No one fights corruption alone. That's how the Victorias of the world win. They isolate their targets. You refuse to be isolated." Marcus looked around his modest townhouse, Sarah's childhood home, the place he'd promised to protect, the anchor Lily needed after losing her mother. They'd come so close to losing it. Victoria's lien, the mounting fines, the pressure designed to force them out. But they'd stayed. And in staying, they'd saved not just themselves, but an entire community. He thought about Victoria Castellane sitting in a federal prison cell, stripped of her mansion and Mercedes and country club membership. He felt no satisfaction in her suffering, only quiet certainty that her removal from power meant families were safer. Justice wasn't about making bad people hurt. It was about making sure they couldn't hurt anyone else. Marcus closed his laptop and walked upstairs. He paused at Lily's door, listening to her breathe, deep and even, the sleep of someone no longer afraid. Victoria had sent armed thugs to terrorize his daughter over not wearing a bra, thinking it would break them. Instead, it had reminded Marcus of something fundamental, that the most powerful weapon against corruption wasn't violence or wealth or connections. It was documentation, evidence, patience, the willingness to follow process even when process felt impossibly slow, and the absolute refusal to let his daughter learn that cruelty went unpunished. Victoria had lost everything, her empire, her freedom, her future. Marcus and Lily had gained something more valuable, the knowledge that they'd stood up to power and won, that systems could work when people forced them to work, that one family's courage could protect thousands of others. The pool incident had happened 18 months ago. In that time, Victoria's criminal enterprise had been exposed, dismantled, and prosecuted. State laws had been rewritten. Communities had been protected. and a 14-year-old girl who'd been cornered and humiliated had transformed into a confident young woman, applying to colleges with an essay about resilience and accountability. Marcus turned off the lights and went to bed, surrounded by the quiet peace of a home that was finally, truly safe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were other HOAs that needed reform, other families facing abuse, other systems requiring accountability. But tonight, in this house, in this community that had been saved from predatory power, justice had been served. Not perfect, never perfect, but real enough to matter. And that was worth everything. Subscribe and don't miss our next story, because real people standing up to corruption deserve to be heard, and their victories deserve to be celebrated. These aren't fairy tales, they're blueprints for change. Hit that subscribe button and join us as we share more stories of ordinary people who refused to stay silent when power became predatory. Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?